What if I told you the most powerful weapon of World War II wasn't a tank, a bomb, or a rifle? What if it was a single terrifying thought, planted directly inside a soldier's mind? You think you're in control of your own thoughts. You're wrong. And in the next 10 minutes, I'll prove it to you by revealing the declassified psychological tactics that turned ordinary men into unthinking weapons of war, and how those same techniques are being used on you right now. This is not a story about heroes and villains. This is a story about the mind. In the chaos of global conflict, a new kind of war was being fought in the shadows, a war for the human soul. While soldiers were dying on the battlefield, a different battle was raging inside their heads, and the military knew it. They studied it. They weaponized it. We're going to uncover 3 of the most sinister psychological operations, kept secret for over 80 years. From the Angel's Whisper technique, a method so brutal it pushed soldiers beyond the physical limits of human endurance, to the echo of fear, a psychological weapon that shattered enemy morale without firing a single shot. And then there's the third. The third operation is a secret so dark it was almost completely erased from history. When you understand what it was, you'll realize that the war never actually ended. It just evolved. Stick with me, and you'll see the world through a completely different lens. Let's start with the first operation, the Angel's Whisper. In 1943, the U.S. military established a secret division called the Psychological Warfare Research Unit. Their mission was simple but terrifying. Find a way to make soldiers perform beyond their physical and mental limits. Not through drugs, not through torture, but through pure psychological manipulation. The documents reveal something extraordinary. They discovered that soldiers could be conditioned to ignore pain, fear, and exhaustion through a specific combination of auditory and psychological triggers. They called it the Angel's Whisper. Here's how it worked. Imagine this, you're a young soldier, maybe 19 years old, fresh from Iowa or Texas. You've been in basic training for 3 months. You're tired. You're scared. You're about to go into your first real combat situation. The night before the operation, you're in your barracks. The commanding officers play a specific audio recording through the loudspeakers. It's not music. It's not a speech. It's something far more sinister. It's a combination of subliminal frequencies, sounds just below the threshold of conscious hearing, mixed with the voice of a trusted authority figure, a general, a commander, someone you've been trained to obey without question. The message is simple, repeated over and over. You are stronger than pain. You are faster than fear. You will not stop. You will not surrender. You are unstoppable. But here's the psychological trick that made it work. These messages weren't delivered in a commanding tone. They were delivered in a soft, almost comforting whisper, like a guardian angel whispering in your ear, like someone protecting you. As one declassified military psychologist wrote in his notes, the human mind is not a fortress. It is a garden, and we have learned how to plant seeds in that garden without the gardener even knowing. The results were disturbing. Soldiers who underwent this conditioning showed a 340% increase in pain tolerance. They could march for 48 hours without sleep. They could continue fighting even after sustaining injuries that would normally incapacitate them. But there was a cost. Many of these soldiers never fully recovered. They developed what we now call PTSD, but back then they just called it shell shock. Some of them never spoke again. Some took their own lives years after the war ended. The military knew this, and they did it anyway. Because in war, a soldier who can't feel pain is worth more than 10 soldiers who can. Now, let's talk about the second operation. This one is even darker. It's called the Echo of Fear. Unlike the Angel's Whisper, which was designed to enhance our own soldiers, this one was designed to destroy the enemy from the inside out. By 1944, the Allies had captured thousands of German soldiers, and they realized something crucial. These soldiers weren't fighting because they believed in Hitler. They were fighting because they were terrified of what would happen if they didn't. So the military developed a psychological operation to weaponize that fear, to turn it inward. Here's what happened. The Allies would capture a German soldier, not to interrogate him, not to execute him, but to reprogram him. They would place him in a specially designed room, completely isolated, with no windows, no natural light. The walls were soundproofed. The only sound was a constant, barely audible hum, a frequency that, according to declassified research, triggers anxiety in the human brain. For 72 hours, this soldier would sit alone. No food, minimal water, no human contact, just the hum and his own thoughts. Then, at random intervals, a voice would come through a hidden speaker. A German voice. A voice that sounded like it could be a friend, a fellow soldier, someone from home. But the message was always the same. They're killing us. They're slaughtering our brothers. The war is lost. There is no escape. There is no hope. The psychological effect was devastating. When these soldiers were released back to German lines, and yes, they were released as part of the operation, they didn't fight. They didn't resist. They spread the message of hopelessness to everyone around them. One declassified report described the effect. A single reprogrammed soldier could demoralize an entire platoon. The fear was contagious. It spread like a virus. And so German commanders noticed that entire units were surrendering without firing a shot. Soldiers were deserting. Morale was collapsing from within. The Allies never had to fire a single bullet in those sectors. But here's what's truly disturbing. After the war, many of these reprogrammed German soldiers couldn't explain why they had surrendered. They had no memory of the psychological conditioning. They only knew that they had felt an overwhelming sense of hopelessness and dread. Some of them spent the rest of their lives trying to understand what had happened to them, wondering if they had been cowards, wondering if they had betrayed their country. They never knew the truth. They never knew that their minds had been weaponized against them. And now, the third operation, the one that was almost completely erased from history. It's called the Narrative Erasure. And it's the most terrifying of all, because it didn't just affect soldiers. It affected everyone. By 1945, the military had realized something profound. Controlling soldiers' minds was one thing. But controlling the narrative itself, controlling what people believed about the war, about the enemy, about victory and defeat, that was far more powerful. So they developed an operation so sophisticated, so comprehensive, that it shaped the entire post-war world. Here's what they did. They didn't just control what soldiers heard. They controlled what civilians heard. They controlled what journalists reported. They controlled what historians wrote. Every piece of information about the psychological operations was classified. Every document was sealed. Every scientist who worked on these projects was sworn to secrecy under threat of treason charges. And then something even more sinister happened. They rewrote the narrative. The public was told that the war was won through superior firepower, superior strategy, superior courage. The psychological operations, they were erased, deleted, removed from the official historical record. Why? Because if the public knew that soldiers' minds could be controlled so completely, so effectively, so invisibly, they would ask dangerous questions. They would ask, could our own government do this to us? And the answer was yes. One declassified memo from a military intelligence officer stated, "The techniques we have perfected in warfare are equally applicable to civilian populations. With proper implementation, an entire nation can be conditioned to accept any narrative, any policy, any outcome. The key is controlling the information. The key is controlling the story." That memo is dated 1946, just as the war was ending. And here's the terrifying part. These techniques didn't disappear. They didn't get abandoned. They evolved. They became more sophisticated, more subtle, more invisible. And they're still being used today. Think about it for a moment. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're being exposed to psychological techniques that were perfected during World War II. Techniques that were designed to control behavior, shape belief, and manipulate emotion. The same principles of repetition that were used on soldiers in barracks are now in your social media feeds. The same emotional triggers that were used to break enemy morale are now in your news headlines. The same narrative control that was used to erase historical truth is now embedded in the entertainment you consume. The war for your mind never ended. It just went digital. Every algorithm that shows you content designed to trigger anger, fear, or outrage, that's psychological warfare. Every headline designed to make you feel hopeless or anxious, that's the echo of fear, repackaged for the 21st century. Every carefully crafted narrative that tells you what to think, what to believe, what to fear, that's the narrative erasure perfected. And the most disturbing part, most people don't even realize it's happening. The soldiers of World War II had no choice. They were conscripted. They were trapped. They were conditioned. But you have a choice. You can recognize these techniques. You can question the narratives you're being fed. You can seek out information that challenges what you've been told. You can think critically instead of accepting what's placed in front of you. Or you can do what millions of people do every single day. You can accept the conditioning. You can believe the narrative. You can let your mind be controlled without even knowing it's happening. The question is, who's winning the war for your mind? Is it you, or is it them? That's the real story of World War II. Not the battles, not the generals, not the weapons. It's the invisible war. The war for control of human consciousness itself. And it's still happening. Right now. Today. The question is, are you paying attention? If this video opened your eyes, if it made you question what you think you know about history, about psychology, about the world around you, then subscribe to the Conflict Files. Because we're going to keep uncovering the stories they don't want you to know. The stories that change everything. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because the next revelation could change your entire worldview. The Conflict Files. Where history meets psychology. Where truth meets power. We'll see you in the next one.